Sometimes, the smallest event can flip your entire life upside down. I didn't realize it at the time, but that's exactly what happened to me, just 4 weeks before my engagement party. I'm Mia, 32 years old, and I was beyond excited to marry the love of my life, Daniel. After 5 years together, we had planned the perfect engagement party. Every little detail was in place, venue booked, decorations picked out, and catering sorted. It was supposed to be a celebration of our love, surrounded by the people we cared about most. Everything seemed perfect, or so I thought. Then, out of nowhere, my mom called. "Mia, cancel the engagement party," she demanded. I nearly dropped my phone. "What? Mom, are you serious?" She wasn't joking. Her voice was calm, as if her request was completely reasonable. "Yes, cancel it. We're throwing a party for Emma instead. She got promoted. Emma is my younger sister by 4 years. The golden child. The one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes." Growing up, I learned to live with the favoritism, even though it hurt. But this was a new level of unfairness. My engagement party was something Daniel and I had been looking forward to for months, and now they wanted me to cancel it for Emma's work promotion. "Mom, come on," I said, trying to stay calm. "I've been planning this for ages. I'm not canceling just because Emma got a promotion." "Don't be selfish, Mia," she snapped. "This is a big deal for your sister. The same guests are invited. It's just a different party. Reschedule yours." I felt my anger start to bubble over. "No way, Mom. This is my engagement party. I'm not canceling it." End of discussion. She didn't take it well. Her voice rose to a high-pitched yell that hurt my ears, but I didn't bother listening anymore. I just hung up, staring at my phone in disbelief. Memories from my childhood came rushing back, times when I'd been pushed aside to make room for Emma. Times when my achievements were barely acknowledged. I remembered my 20th birthday, when my parents forgot it entirely, until Grandma called to wish me. They threw together a last-minute celebration with a store-bought cake and a gift card that felt like an afterthought. Meanwhile, Emma's 17th birthday a few months earlier had been a grand 5-day affair. I was lost in thought when Daniel walked in. "Mia, what's wrong?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. I told him everything, the call from my mom, the demand to cancel, and all the painful memories that came flooding back. Daniel listened quietly, his expression growing more serious with every word. "That's ridiculous," he said when I finished. "We're not canceling anything." I nodded, grateful for his unwavering support. "I know, but why can't they ever put me first? Just once?" Daniel reached out and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "Because they don't see what I see," he said softly, "but I put you first. Always." I managed a small smile, my heart swelling with love for this man who saw me when my own family didn't. "That's why I'm marrying you." That night, we sat together, going over the final details for the party, determined to make it perfect. As I drifted off to sleep, I pushed thoughts of my family aside. This was my time, my moment. I wasn't going to let them ruin it. The next morning, I woke up with a new resolve. There were a million things to do, sending out invitations, confirming the decorations, finalizing catering. I was determined to focus on the excitement of the event. Then, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my cousin, Lily. "Hey, Mia, is everything okay with you and Daniel? I heard you guys broke up." I stared at the screen, completely confused. "What? No way. We're fine. Who told you that?" Lily's reply came almost instantly. "Weird. Aunt Olivia said your mom told her the engagement was off." I felt a sinking sensation in my stomach. I immediately called Lily, my hands trembling. "What's going on?" I asked the second she picked up. "I don't know, Mia. Aunt Olivia called last night and said your mom told her you and Daniel had a huge fight and called everything off. She said we should all go to Emma's promotion party instead." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "That's not true," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "We're still engaged, and the party is still on. Mom wanted me to cancel for Emma's thing, but I refused." Lily was silent for a moment, then whispered, "Oh no, Mia, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. We spent the next hour on the phone, trying to sort through the mess. It turned out my mom had called every relative on the guest list, spreading lies about a supposed breakup between Daniel and me, encouraging everyone to attend Emma's party instead. A wild story, fabricated to make me look like the villain. I hung up, my head spinning. My own mother had sabotaged my engagement party. When Daniel got home from work that evening, one look at my face told him something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, pulling me into his arms. I told him everything. Mom's calls, the lies, the twisted stories she'd spread. Daniel's expression darkened with anger. "That's it. We're cutting them off. All of them. Your parents, Emma, the whole bunch." I knew he was right. But the thought of cutting off my family terrified me. No matter how badly they treated me, they were still my family. "Let's focus on fixing this first," I suggested. "We need to let everyone know the engagement is still on." Daniel nodded. "Okay. Where do we start?" That night, we went into full damage control mode, sending emails, making phone calls, posting on social media. I wrote a long message explaining everything to the entire guest list, making it clear that Daniel and I were still together, and the party was very much happening. It was exhausting and humiliating. By the time we finished, it was past midnight. My voice was hoarse, and my eyes burned from staring at screens for hours. "We did it," Daniel said, pulling me into a comforting hug. "It's going to be okay." I wanted to believe him, but deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Notifications were pouring in, texts, missed calls, and social media messages. I groaned and reached for my phone, bracing myself for whatever mess awaited me. First text. "Hey Mia, just saw your post. So glad to hear you and Daniel are still together. Can't wait for the party." Second text. "Mia, I'm so confused. Your mom said it was canceled. What's going on?" Third text. "Wow, your mom is something else. Are you okay?" I sighed, running a hand over my face. It was exhausting having to clean up a mess I hadn't even made. As I scrolled through the messages, I noticed one from my Aunt Talia, my dad's sister. She had always been kind to me, more like a second mom when I was growing up. "Mia, can we meet for coffee? I want to hear your side of the story." I appreciated that she wanted to hear me out, but it also stung that people needed clarification. Did my mom's word hold that much weight? I texted back, "Sure, let's meet today." After I got ready, I made my way to the little cafe near Aunt Talia's house. As soon as I walked in, she waved me over with a warm smile. "Mia," she said, standing to hug me. "I'm glad you came." "Of course," I said, taking a seat across from her. "I figured you'd want to hear the truth." She nodded, her expression serious. "Your mom's been telling everyone that you canceled your party out of spite. She said you were upset that Emma's promotion overshadowed your engagement." I clenched my jaw, anger bubbling up again. "That's not even close to the truth. Mom called and demanded I cancel my party for Emma's promotion. When I refused, she made up this whole story." Aunt Talia sighed, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I don't know why she's like this. It's always been this way with Emma." "Exactly," I said, my frustration spilling out. Growing up, it was always about Emma. She was the golden child. I never complained, I just took it. But this was supposed to be my moment. And she couldn't even let me have that. Talia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I believe you, and I'm sorry you've had to deal with this. It's not fair." I blinked back tears, grateful for her support. "Thank you. That means a lot." She gave me a reassuring smile. "You deserve to be happy, Mia. Don't let anyone take that away from you." After our coffee, I felt a little better. At least someone in my family had my back. But as I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Grandma. I hesitated before answering. My grandma had always been the one steady, loving presence in my life, but I had no idea where she stood in all this. "Mia, sweetheart," she said as soon as I picked up. Her voice was warm and comforting, but I could hear the concern underneath. I've been hearing some things, and I wanted to check in with you. Grandma, I don't know what Mom's been saying, but it's not true, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Daniel and I are fine. We're still getting married, and the party is still happening. Oh, I know, dear, she said gently. Your mom called me too, but I told her I wasn't going to get involved in her nonsense. I felt a wave of relief. Thank you, Grandma. She chuckled. Of course, I've seen this pattern for years. Your mother has always had a blind spot when it comes to Emma, but you don't need her approval to be happy, Mia. You have Daniel, and you have me. Her words brought tears to my eyes. I just don't understand why she keeps doing this. Because some people can't see past their own expectations, Grandma said softly. But that's not your burden to carry. Focus on your future. Your happiness is what matters. I hung up feeling lighter. Grandma's words stuck with me for the rest of the day. Maybe I didn't need to keep chasing my parents' approval. Maybe I needed to let go of that hope entirely. That evening, Daniel came home from work and found me on the couch, staring at my phone. Hey, you okay? He asked, sitting next to me. I leaned against him, letting his steady presence calm me. Yeah, I think so, Grandma called. She's on our side. Daniel smiled. I love your grandma. She's always been real with you. I nodded. Yeah, it's just hard, you know. I always hoped my parents would come around, but it's clear they never will. Daniel wrapped his arm around me. You don't need them, Mia. You've got me, and we've got our friends, your grandma, and everyone who truly cares. I know, I said, squeezing his hand. I just wish it didn't hurt so much. It'll get easier, he promised. One day, you'll look back and be glad you stood your ground. I hoped he was right, but things weren't quite over yet. The next morning, my cousin Lily called me, her voice frantic. Mia, you won't believe what just happened, she said. Your mom. She showed up at my mom's house, furious. She's saying she's going to confront you directly. I groaned. Of course she is. She's saying you're trying to tear the family apart, that you're being selfish and ungrateful. Are you serious? I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. After everything she's done? Yeah, Lily said. But honestly, everyone sees through it now. The way she's handling this is making her look bad. People are starting to realize who the real problem is. That gave me a tiny bit of satisfaction, but I wasn't looking forward to whatever confrontation was coming. Sure enough, later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with another text. From Mom. We need to talk. Now. I stared at the message, dread creeping in. What is it? Daniel asked, noticing my expression. It's my mom, I said quietly. She wants to talk. Daniel frowned. Do you want me to be there? I shook my head. No, I need to do this alone. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Whatever happened next, I was ready to face it. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. Mom's text glared back at me like a challenge. We need to talk. Now. I could feel my chest tightening with anxiety. Every instinct told me to ignore it, to let her stew in her own mess. But a part of me knew that if I avoided her, it would only get worse. She'd keep pushing, keep twisting the story to make me look like the villain. So, I decided to face it head on. I typed back, fine. Come over. Less than an hour later, there was a sharp knock at the door. I opened it to find my mom standing there, arms crossed, her face set in that familiar look of disapproval. For a split second, I felt like a kid again, waiting for the inevitable lecture. But I wasn't a kid anymore. Come in, I said, keeping my voice steady. She walked in without a word, scanning the room like she was inspecting it for flaws. I gestured toward the couch. Have a seat. She sat down stiffly, and I took the armchair across from her. We sat in silence for a few moments, the tension thick in the air. Finally, she broke the silence. I can't believe you went through with the party, she said, her tone sharp. After everything I said, I folded my arms. Why wouldn't I? It's my engagement party, Mom. Daniel and I have been planning it for months. She shook her head, looking genuinely baffled. You could have compromised. Emma's promotion was a huge moment for her. You should have supported her. There it was. The same old pattern. Emma comes first. Always. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. Mom, do you hear yourself? You're telling me that I should have canceled a once-in-a-lifetime event for me, just to celebrate something that happens every day. People get promotions all the time. But an engagement? That's special. And you wanted me to throw it away. Her lips pressed into a thin line. You're being dramatic. No, I'm not. I shot back. I've spent my whole life being pushed aside for Emma. And I've always let it go, because I thought that's just how things were, but not anymore. Her expression hardened. Family comes first, Mia. You should know that by now. I laughed bitterly. Family? You're lecturing me about family. You went behind my back and told everyone my engagement was off. You lied to our entire family just to make sure they'd go to Emma's party instead of mine. That's not what family does. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. No, I'm done letting you control the narrative. You've been making excuses for years, pretending everything is about family when it's really about Emma, and I'm tired of it. For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Well, she said, her voice cold. I hope you know how hurt your sister is. She thought you'd support her big day. I stared at her in disbelief. Mom, this was my big day, and you couldn't even pretend to care. Silence hung between us. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a mix of anger and sadness swirling inside me. Look, I said softly, I don't want to fight with you. But you need to understand that I'm not going to keep sacrificing my happiness just to make Emma feel more important. I love her, but I love myself too. And I won't keep letting you push me aside. Her eyes softened for a moment. Mia, I thought just for a second that she might apologize, that maybe she understood. But then she sighed. You've always been so stubborn. I felt my heart sink. Of course, she wasn't going to apologize. She wasn't going to admit she was wrong. Well, I said, standing up, if that's how you feel, then maybe it's best we take some space. Her eyes widened. You're cutting me off? I'm setting boundaries, I corrected. I'm not saying we'll never talk again, but until you can respect me and my relationship with Daniel, I'm stepping back. She stood too, her expression cold and distant. You'll regret this, Mia. Family is everything. I met her gaze, my voice steady. No, respect is everything, and if you can't give me that, then I don't need you in my life. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, pausing for a moment before turning back to me. You're making a mistake. I shook my head. No, Mom. I'm finally doing what's right for me. She left without another word, the door clicking shut behind her. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle over me. Then I felt a pair of arms wrap around me from behind. I'm so proud of you, Daniel whispered. I leaned into him, feeling the tension slowly drain from my body. I didn't think it would be this hard. It's always hard to stand up to people you love, he said gently. But you did it. You stood your ground. I turned to face him, tears welling in my eyes. Do you think I did the right thing? He cupped my face in his hands, his gaze steady. Absolutely. You've spent too long putting everyone else first. It's time you put yourself first. I nodded, letting his words sink in. He was right. For the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself, and it felt liberating. That night, we sat on the couch, talking about our future, our wedding plans, our dreams, the life we were building together. As we talked, I realized something. I didn't need my parents' approval to be happy. I didn't need their validation to feel whole. I had Daniel, I had my friends, and I had the people who truly loved me. And that was enough. The days following my conversation with Mom were strange. A mix of peace and tension hung in the air. On one hand, I felt lighter, relieved to have finally stood my ground. On the other, there was this nagging feeling in the back of my mind, like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Mom wasn't the type to just let things go. Sure enough, 2 days later, my cousin Lily called again. "Mia, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but you need to know. Your mom is going around saying you've cut the family off. She's making herself sound like the victim, saying you abandoned them." I sighed. Of course she is. "I'm so sorry," Lily said softly. "I've been telling people the real story, though. The ones who matter know the truth." "I appreciate that," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's just exhausting, you know? She's always twisting things to make herself look better." "Yeah, it's messed up," Lily agreed. "But honestly, people are starting to see through it, especially after what happened with the engagement party. That was some comfort, at least." After I hung up, Daniel found me sitting on the couch, staring at my phone again. "Lily?" he guessed. I nodded. "Mom's playing the victim card. Again." He sat beside me, pulling me into his arms. "Let her. People who know you will see through it." "I know," I murmured, resting my head on his shoulder. "I just hate that it's always like this. I feel like I'm constantly defending myself." Daniel gently tilted my chin up so I'd look at him. "You don't have to defend yourself to anyone, Mia. The people who love you already know the truth." His words stayed with me as we went about our day. I tried to focus on wedding plans and work, but the family drama lingered in the back of my mind. A few days later, I decided to visit my grandma. I needed some grounding, someone who always saw me for who I was, without all the family politics. When I walked into her cozy little house, the familiar scent of lavender and freshly baked cookies hit me. It felt like home. "Sweetheart," Grandma greeted me with a warm hug. "I was just about to make tea. Come sit." I followed her into the kitchen, feeling a wave of comfort wash over me. "How are you holding up?" she asked as she poured the tea. I sighed. "I'm okay, I guess. It's just hard." Mom's spreading stories again, saying I've abandoned the family. Grandma shook her head, her expression stern. "Your mother has always had a way of twisting things to suit her narrative. Don't let it get to you, Mia." "I'm trying," I said, taking a sip of tea. "It's just exhausting. I finally stood up for myself, and now she's making me out to be the bad guy." Grandma reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "You did the right thing. Sometimes, standing up for yourself means others won't like it. But you can't live your life trying to please people who don't appreciate you." Her words settled deep in my chest, filling a space I hadn't realized was empty. "Thanks, Grandma," I said softly. She smiled. "You've always been strong, Mia. You just needed to see it for yourself." After tea, we sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the garden. It was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past few weeks. As we sat there, Grandma said something that stuck with me. "Family isn't just blood, sweetheart. It's the people who love and support you, no matter what. And from what I've seen, you've built yourself a beautiful family with Daniel and your friends." She was right. I didn't need to keep fighting for my parents' approval. I had my own family now, people who truly cared, who lifted me up instead of tearing me down. When I got home that evening, Daniel was waiting for me with dinner already on the table. "How's Grandma?" he asked, pulling out a chair for me. "She's amazing," I said with a smile. "She always knows exactly what to say." Daniel grinned. "I love that woman." "Me too," I said, reaching for his hand. "And you know what? She's right. We've got our own family now." Daniel's expression softened. "We do. And it's only going to grow from here." As we ate dinner, I felt something shift inside me. A quiet confidence I hadn't felt before. I was done chasing validation from people who couldn't give it. Later that night, as we curled up on the couch, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Emma. "Mia, can we talk?" I stared at the screen, debating whether to respond. Part of me didn't want to open that door again, but another part, maybe the hopeful part, wanted to believe there was a chance we could fix things. Daniel noticed my hesitation. "Emma?" I nodded. "What do you want to do?" he asked gently. I sighed. I don't know. I'm tired of fighting. But maybe it's worth hearing her out, he suggested. Maybe, I said quietly. After a moment, I typed back, okay, let's talk. The next morning, I met Emma at a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town. I wasn't sure what to expect. Part of me hoped for an apology. Another part of me was bracing for more accusations. Either way, I needed to hear her out. Emma was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, nervously stirring her coffee. She looked up as I approached, giving me a small, tentative smile. Mia. Emma? I said, sliding into the seat across from her. We sat in awkward silence for a moment before she cleared her throat. Thanks for coming. I nodded. You wanted to talk. She sighed, setting her spoon down. I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. The party, Mom, all of it. And? I prompted, keeping my tone neutral. Emma looked down at her hands. I didn't realize how much Mom's behavior has hurt you over the years. I guess I never really thought about it from your perspective. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. It's not just about the party, Emma. It's everything. You've always been the center of attention. Mom and Dad made sure of that. And I just got used to being second. Emma flinched at my words. I never meant to make you feel that way. Maybe not, I said softly. But you never spoke up either. You went along with it. And when Mom demanded I cancel my engagement party, you didn't say anything. You just let her do it. She looked up, guilt written all over her face. You're right. I should have said something. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. Do you even know what Mom did after I refused to cancel? She called everyone on my guest list and told them the engagement was off. She spread lies about me and Daniel, saying we broke up. Emma's eyes widened. I didn't know that. Yeah, I said bitterly. That's how far she was willing to go to make sure your promotion party was the priority. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Mom's always been intense? I guess I just thought that was normal. It's not, I said firmly. It's toxic, and I'm done letting it control my life. She nodded slowly. I get it. I really do. For the first time, I saw something shift in Emma's expression, a genuine understanding. I don't want to lose you, Mia, she said softly. You're my sister, and I know I've been selfish. I let Mom's favoritism go unchecked because it benefited me, but I don't want things to be like that anymore. Her words caught me off guard. I'd never heard Emma admit to any of this before. Do you really mean that? I asked cautiously. Yes, she said, her voice steady. I want to fix things between us. I don't know how, but I'm willing to try. I took a sip of my coffee, considering her words. Could I trust her? Could things really change? I'm not sure it'll be easy, I said finally. There's a lot of hurt between us. I know, Emma said, but I'm willing to put in the effort if you are. I studied her for a moment, searching for any hint of insincerity. But all I saw was my sister, someone who, despite everything, was trying to make things right. Okay, I said quietly. We'll try. Emma's face lit up with relief. Thank you, Mia. But, I added, there need to be boundaries. I'm not putting myself in situations where Mom can hurt me again. I'm done with the manipulation. I get it, Emma said, and I'll do my best to keep her in check. I smiled faintly. Good luck with that. We both laughed, a genuine, light-hearted moment that felt like a glimpse of what our relationship could be if we let go of the past. As we finished our coffee, Emma looked at me seriously. I really am happy for you and Daniel. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Thank you, I said, feeling a warmth I hadn't expected. That means a lot. When we parted ways, I felt a strange mix of emotions, hope, relief, and a lingering wariness. I wasn't ready to fully trust Emma yet, but at least we were on the right path. That evening, Daniel noticed my mood as soon as he walked through the door. You look lighter, he said, pulling me into a hug. What happened? I met with Emma, I told him. We had a good talk. She admitted a lot of things I never thought she would. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Really? Yeah, I said, smiling softly. She wants to fix things. And how do you feel about that? He asked, gently brushing a strand of hair from my face. Cautiously optimistic, I admitted. I'm not jumping back into anything, but it's a start. Daniel nodded. That's fair. Just remember, you don't owe anyone more than you're willing to give. I know, I said, wrapping my arms around him. But it felt good to hear her say she wants to change. We spent the rest of the evening curled up on the couch, watching our favorite show. For the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. As we sat there, Daniel's hand intertwined with mine, I realized something important. This was what mattered. The people who loved me for who I was, the ones who stood by me through the hard times. Family wasn't about blood, it was about love, respect, and mutual support, and I was finally learning to choose my own family. A few weeks passed, and life slowly returned to normal. The chaos surrounding the engagement party started to feel like a distant memory, though the scars from the fallout were still there. Emma kept her word. She called me every now and then, not to gossip or dig for family drama, but just to check in. It was weird at first, but over time, I realized she was genuinely trying to build a healthier relationship with me. Mom, on the other hand? Radio silence. I wasn't surprised. She had always been the type to hold grudges, and I knew she wasn't ready to let go of her version of the story. And honestly, that was fine with me. Daniel and I had a wedding to plan, and I wasn't going to let her absence or her opinions cast a shadow over it. One evening, as we were finalizing the guest list, I sat at the dining table, staring at the last few blank spaces. Mom, Dad, Emma. The three names sat there like a heavy weight in my mind. Daniel noticed me hesitating. Still thinking about inviting them? I nodded slowly. I don't know. Part of me feels like I should, but another part of me knows it wouldn't end well. He sat down beside me, resting a hand on my shoulder. Mia, it's your wedding, our wedding. It should be about celebrating love and happiness with the people who truly support us. I looked up at him, feeling a lump in my throat. But they're still my family. They are, Daniel agreed. But they don't define you. You've built your own family with the people who actually show up for you. Don't let guilt pull you back into something toxic. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. He was right. Taking a deep breath, I crossed out their names. I don't think I can invite them, I said quietly. Daniel smiled gently. Then don't. This day should be about joy, not old wounds. As I set down the pen, I felt a strange mix of emotions, sadness, relief, and an overwhelming sense of freedom. The weeks leading up to the wedding flew by. We picked out a beautiful garden venue with a charming gazebo for the ceremony. I chose my dress, finalized the flowers, and leaned heavily on my bridesmaids, my closest friends who had stood by me through all the chaos. The night before the wedding, I got a text from Emma. Mia, I hope tomorrow is everything you've ever dreamed of. You deserve it. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying, Thank you, Emma. That means a lot. She didn't ask if she could come, and I respected that. Maybe she knew this wasn't her place. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of the mirror in my bridal suite, adjusting my veil. My heart was pounding with excitement and nerves. Grandma walked in, her eyes shining with pride. Oh, Mia, you look stunning. Thanks, Grandma, I said, smiling at her reflection. She walked up behind me, resting a hand on my shoulder. I know this hasn't been an easy road for you, but look at you now, standing tall, choosing your own happiness. I turned to her, tears welling in my eyes. I couldn't have done it without you. She hugged me tightly. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. You've shown so much strength, and you've built yourself a beautiful life. When it was time for the ceremony, I stood at the end of the aisle, my heart swelling with emotion as I saw Daniel waiting for me under the gazebo. As I walked toward him, I took in the faces of the people gathered there. Grandma was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Daniel's parents were beaming with pride. My friends, my chosen family, were all there, smiling and cheering me on. These were my people, the ones who had stood by me when it mattered most. When I reached Daniel, he took my hands in his eyes shining with love. "You ready?" he whispered. "More than ever," I replied, my voice steady. We recited our vows, and as we did, a deep sense of belonging settled over me. This was my life now. A life I'd built on my own terms. A life filled with love, respect, and mutual support. At the reception, as Daniel and I shared our first dance, I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling a peace I hadn't felt in years. "I love you," he whispered in my ear. "I love you too," I said, my heart full. Later, as the night wound down, I found a quiet moment to sit with Grandma. "I was thinking," I said softly. "Family isn't just about who we're born to. It's about who we choose to have in our lives. And I'm really lucky to have people like you and Daniel." Grandma smiled, her eyes twinkling. "You've figured it out, sweetheart. Family is about love, not obligation." As I sat there, watching Daniel laugh with our friends, I realized I wasn't carrying the same weight I once did. I had let go of the need for validation from people who couldn't give it, and in doing so, I'd finally found freedom. In the weeks that followed, I heard through the grapevine that Mom was still telling her version of events, but it didn't bother me anymore. Her narrative didn't define me. I was living my truth. Emma and I kept in touch. We weren't best friends overnight, but we were making progress. Slowly but surely, we were learning how to be sisters again. On our own terms, without Mom's influence. One afternoon, I got a text from Emma. "Mia, I've been thinking a lot about what you said. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner. I promise I'll do better." I smiled at the screen, feeling that same cautious optimism from before. "Thanks, Emma. I appreciate that." As I looked around my home, filled with love and laughter, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. This was my life now. Not dictated by old family dynamics, not overshadowed by someone else's spotlight. I had built my own family, my own happiness, and I was finally free. Story 2. Hello, my name is Nora, and I feel like I'm walking a tightrope in my family. My mother, my older brother Anthony, and his wife Riley live with me. We may appear to be a normal family from the outside, but on the inside there is conflict and underlying animosity. With a sophisticated degree and a well-paying career, Anthony is the family's pride and the golden boy. Riley's portrayal as a composed wife is flawless. She constantly manages to look encouraging while subtly escalating the conflict. I'm the one who remains at home in the meantime, doing everything from paying the bills to making sure our mother is comfortable. However, my efforts are frequently ignored. I've lived with my mother for years, and she's not shy about her fondness for Anthony. I think it would be preferable to live with Riley and your brother. At one point, she said something that struck a deeper chord than she knew. It appears that I will always be the family's underappreciated member, regardless of how much I offer emotionally or monetarily. But if I've learned anything, it's that hardship is a source of strength. Despite the difficulties in my experience, I am confident that I am more capable than they realize. When my father became very ill during my second year of college, my life took a sudden change. He needed ongoing care, and it soon became apparent that my mother, who wasn't good at taking care of the house, couldn't do it by herself. Although caregivers were employed, they were unable to meet all of the needs, so I had to fill in as necessary. In order to make sure my father was comfortable and had all he needed, I frequently had to dash between classes and home. It was difficult to juggle my education and caregiving, but I couldn't let him suffer. It was on one of these difficult days that I had an idea. After I graduated and began working, how would I take care of my father? I looked at other options because of the uncertainty. I took the ideas I was learning in my economics lectures and started researching internet business strategies. Soon after, I formed a partnership with friends who were IT and management experts, and we started a tiny internet company. In order to be close to my father, I decided to work remotely from home while the majority of our team worked from an office. I began making a substantial financial contribution to our household as the firm gradually gained traction. My father saw my commitment and smiled proudly at me one day when I assisted him with his prescriptions. He said, "Nora, you've given up so much for this family. You've developed into a responsible, diligent lady. You have my admiration." His remarks had a profound effect on me, causing my eyes to water. His remarks made every sleepless night and tense day worthwhile, even if it wasn't often that my efforts were recognized. Notwithstanding the difficulties, I was able to provide for my family in ways I never would have imagined when I changed my professional goals and launched an internet company. Although it wasn't the route I had originally planned, it turned out to be one of development and resiliency. My father's acknowledgement served as a reminder that my efforts weren't in vain, despite the fact that my contributions were sometimes overlooked by others. With his keen mind and tenacity, my brother Anthony has always been the pride and pleasure of the family. After graduating from one of the best universities, he immediately got a renowned position. He looked to be exalted by his accomplishment, and my mother never squandered the chance to remind me. Anthony was off living his dream in the city, disconnected from the realities of our family life, while I stayed at home to balance taking care of others and growing my internet company. Not long after he got his job, Anthony completely cut off contact with us. He pretended that we didn't exist, stopped returning our calls, and disregarded our messages. He seemed to have severed all connections, leaving my father and I bewildered and wounded. Anthony had all he needed to achieve since my father had provided for him financially while he was in school. Anthony, however, was unappreciative. His silence was devastating, particularly at a time when my father's condition was getting worse and we needed all the help we could get. Then suddenly Anthony made contact, after being disconnected for years. We were caught off guard by his unexpected contact, but it wasn't a cordial reunion. Rather, he called to request a wedding present of $99,000. His demand was bold as well as startling. Ever the devoted parent, my mother was apprehensive but open to the idea. She defended his request by stating that it is the responsibility of parents to assist their children in beginning a new life. My father had been listening in silence, but her remarks infuriated him. "What's the point of giving him anything?" my dad inquired. His voice was shaking with anguish and frustration. "He left us. He never came in at all. And now he wants us to pay for his wedding." I could feel my father's displeasure. Anthony's accomplishments had always made him proud, but this flagrant disrespect for family destroyed that pride. In an attempt to defend Anthony, my mother insisted that supporting him would improve ties within the family. But that didn't sit well with my father. While Anthony disappeared without saying anything, "Nora has been here every day to help this family. He now want money," he firmly stated. "He doesn't deserve a single penny." His normally serene voice was laced with wrath and anguish. The home was uneasy after the dispute. Unquestionably, my father was disappointed with Anthony, and for the first time, he publicly recognized the sacrifices I had made for the family. In addition to harming our father, Anthony's self-centered actions had revealed the brittle relationships in our family. His actions left a permanent scar on our already damaged relationships, and it was obvious that his priorities were elsewhere. The death of my father was as unexpected as it was devastating. When I went to see how he was doing one morning, he was not responding. I phoned for an ambulance in a panic, but it was too late. He had left. We had lost the man who had been my confidant, my support, and the one person who genuinely valued me. Words could never heal the emptiness left by his passing. However, I knew I needed to be strong, to properly bid him farewell. I soon discovered that I was on my own while the funeral preparations got underway. Instead of grieving, my mother, who ought to have been in control, appeared aloof. As if nothing had happened, she spent her time on her phone, browsing social media. "Nora, you take care of it," she remarked nonchalantly. "I'm too overwhelmed," leaving me to shoulder the logistical and emotional load. It hurt that she didn't care. However, I pressed on. I'm determined to pay tribute to my father. An unpleasant surprise emerged on the day of the burial. While others came to pay their respects, Anthony and his wife Riley arrived, both of them dressed too badly for the solemn event. Anthony casually walked in, drawing attention for all the wrong reasons. The uneasiness was exacerbated by Riley's ostentatious clothing and arrogant manner, but my mother smiled warmly at them as though nothing were wrong. With an uncharacteristically upbeat tone for the situation, she replied, "I'm glad you're here, Anthony." To my surprise, she said, "We can now talk about your father's inheritance." The room's vibe changed abruptly. The morning guests were now seeing a family drama play out. Anthony, who never misses a chance, spoke out. "To be honest, I don't believe Nora should have any expectations. She has long been dependent on her father." I sensed the heat of everyone's gaze on me as he spoke in a sarcastic manner. I balled my fists, but said nothing. I didn't want to spoil the day that was supposed to be dedicated to my dad, my mother added, as if she didn't realize it was incorrect at the time. "The family owns your father's possessions, and Anthony, his eldest son, is entitled to the most." It was difficult to accept that this discussion was taking place at a funeral. My father had put forth a lot of effort to support us, and now his legacy was being diminished to a little financial dispute. I gazed at the visitors, whose expressions were marked with disbelief and uneasiness. Some of them were whispering to one another, trying to understand the obvious disregard for the event. With my mother's encouragement, Anthony turned to me and said, "You've been a burden, Nora. I should be given what is legitimately mine." His spouse gave him a nod of approval. Her sneer is still annoying. I inhaled deeply, resisting the need to snap. This conversation is not appropriate at this time or location. Despite the chaos inside of me, I spoke firmly and steadily. "We are not here to quarrel about inheritance. We are here to respect Dad." Anthony snorted, but remained silent. However, my mother was clearly annoyed, as though I had interrupted her plans. Riley left the burial early, allowing me to complete what they had so heedlessly interrupted, and after a few more uncomfortable minutes, Anthony moved near my mother and muttered something before the two of them. I couldn't help but feel a mixture of grief and rage as I stood beside my father's coffin. I was grieving the loss of the one person who genuinely cared about me, and rage at the self-centeredness that had eclipsed his last goodbye. I had to pick up the pieces by myself, since it was obvious that my family had broken irreparably. But if I had learnt anything from my father, it was to be resilient, and I planned to carry on in his honor, regardless of how challenging the path ahead may be. When Anthony made the decision to claim his alleged rights as the eldest son, the inheritance battle started. He was quite explicit about his allegation after the burial. "I own this house." Standing in the living room as though he already claimed the space as the oldest son of his father, he declared. "I was born with it." Riley, his wife, was standing next to him, nodding in agreement with her typical arrogant look. Sitting on the couch, my mother watched in silence. Her lack of protest says 1,000 words. I inhaled deeply, my feelings seething under the surface. I had been the one to support this family financially for years, looking after my father when no one else would. But now here came Anthony, who had not been seen in years, claiming what he felt was rightfully his. His bluster would have been amusing if it weren't so enraged. "Anthony," I spoke in a forceful yet composed tone, "you don't own this house. Mom doesn't own it either. It's mine legally." There was silence in the room. Anthony's arrogant expression wavered, and Riley briefly appeared surprised. "What are you discussing?" When Anthony did inquire, his voice was brimming with incredulity. "I'm referring to the fact that prior to his death, Dad left me this house." I answered, refusing to back down. Since I was the one caring for him and providing for this family, he transferred title to my name. Anger reddened Anthony's cheeks. "That isn't feasible. How come he would do that? You're not even employed. You've been squandering here." Even though his remarks made my palms shake, I remained unfazed. "Freeloading," I shot back, raising my voice a little. "Do you realize how much money I spent on this house while you were out in the city enjoying your life?" I was present to ensure that Dad had the attention he needed, keeping this house running and paying the bills. I looked to my mom in the hopes of even a passing nod, but she looked away. Even more painful than Anthony's charges was her silence. It seemed as though she didn't value any of the sacrifices I had made. I'll remind you, I went on, speaking steadily once again. Mom's spending habits caused Dad's money to run out a long time ago. Subsequently, I began contributing $3,000 per month to sustain the home. Dad was aware that I was the only one he could trust. For this reason, he ensured that the house would remain in my name. As I spoke, a recollection sprang to mind. I recall the day my dad informed me about the relocation. "Nora," he had said. He spoke in a faint but determined voice. "I'm concerned about your safety. I trust you to act morally since you have done so much for this family." I was strengthened then by their words, and I am strengthened today. But Anthony wasn't prepared to give up. "This is unfair," he yelled. "I am the oldest son. I'm worthy of this mansion. How can a family be so treacherous to their own blood?" A sour chuckle escaped my lips. "Betrayal," I repeated. "Anthony, you left us for years. When Dad was ill, you didn't even bother to check on him. Your abrupt return is the sole act of treachery here, believing that you can steal something that isn't yours." Whispering something I couldn't hear, Riley pulled at Anthony's arm, obviously uncomfortable. With a low defensive tone, my mother eventually broke her quiet. "Perhaps we should live together, Nora. Your father would have approved of it." I gave a hard shake of my head. "No, Mother. Dad trusted me. Therefore, he wanted me to have this house. Anthony and you have only demonstrated self-centeredness, and I will no longer allow you to take advantage of me." My resolve had been strengthened by their treachery. This was more than simply a home. It represented my years of sacrifice and my father's faith in me. I wasn't going to give it to people who only thought about family when it was convenient for them. I felt genuinely powerful for the first time in years, prepared to leave their toxic grip and start a life that I wanted. Now was the moment to escape. I was leaving after years of sacrifice and unrecognized accomplishments when I made a decision that would alter everything. Standing in the home's living room, which was the scene of many traumatic events, I turned to face Riley, Anthony, and my mother. When I made my announcement, their expressions were a mixture of amazement and incredulity. I firmly said, "I've had enough. All I've gotten in exchange for years of helping this family is treachery and contempt. I'm finished. I'm ending my relationship with you and leaving this house." Anthony leaned back in his chair and sneered. "Nora, where will you even go? You've been forced to play the martyr all your life." I looked him in the eye without flinching. "Here's where you're mistaken. This has been in the works for a while. I'm moving overseas and selling the house. Surrounded by individuals who only regard me as a burden, I don't intend to stay here." My mom's eyes became wide with shock. "This home isn't sellable. Our family has owned it for many years. We haven't lived there for a while." I gave a chilly response. When Dad passed ownership to me, it became mine. He had faith in me to handle it. Currently, I'm deciding to let things go. Even though there was silence in the room, I could sense the tension building. Riley and Anthony glanced at one another, and my mother appeared to want to quarrel, but was at a loss for words. I started packing that night while I packed up memories and folded clothes. A wave of feelings swept over me. I reflected on all the times I had stayed up late to balance my studies and caregiving, only to be met with apathy. I thought back to my father's words of support, the infrequent affirmations that kept me going, and I reflected on all the ways Anthony and my mother had taken me for granted. With every year that goes by, their selfishness gets worse, but a growing sense of relief coexisted with the bitterness. I was taking back my life by leaving, a life that had been eclipsed by their expectations and demands. I experienced hope for a future I could control for the first time. Through my uncle, who had always been a quiet support system, I completed the sale of the house. He acknowledged my motivations and promised to take care of everything. I purchased a one-way ticket to a tropical location after the sale was finalized. It had always been my dream. It was my opportunity to make a fresh start and escape the poisonous atmosphere I had spent so much time in. I experienced a strange mixture of liberation and sadness as I locked the door for the last time. The house had represented my growth and my hardships, but as I walked away, it no longer defined who I was. In addition to physical property, I left behind the burden of a family that had never really appreciated me. I was going to take full advantage of this new beginning. I boarded a plane to a tropical country that had always been a far-off dream, relieved of the burden of my previous life. With a sense of promise, the warm sun, soft breeze, and colorful scenery welcomed me. This was my new beginning. A location free from my family's expectations and burdens, where I could at last live for myself. It took some getting used to during the first few weeks. I rented a tiny apartment with big windows that let in the sound of the waves, close to the beach. Every morning started with coffee and fresh fruit on the balcony while the sun rose over the sea. The tense atmosphere of my former home was a far cry from this. I had not felt at peace in years until I came here. I was able to adapt to my new life by establishing a routine. I worked on my internet business during the day, which gave me the financial flexibility I required to take this action. The afternoons were spent meeting people from all walks of life, exploring local markets, and sampling exotic cuisine. The people there were friendly and hospitable. Their relaxed back demeanor reminded me of the significance of slowing down and embracing life's simple pleasures. One evening, as I strolled down the coastline, the golden hues of the setting sun shining on the ocean, I found myself pondering about my voyage. The agony of my family's mistreatment still persisted, but it no longer defined me. I had acquired vital things from those difficulties, lessons about resiliency, self-worth, and the significance of setting limits. For years, I must sacrifice my own aspirations to support a family that never fully respected me. But those sacrifices had turned me into someone strong and independent. My father's faith in me, while a brief flare of light in the gloom, had been a turning point. It reminded me of my value and gave me the strength to break out. Now I was embracing my freedom, setting me a life where I was in charge. The obstacles I endured had taught me to prioritize my own pleasure and to surround myself with people who appreciated and respected me. The future was no longer a source of dread, but one of exhilaration and unlimited possibilities. As I stood on the beach watching the waves wash over the coast, I felt a deep feeling of thankfulness for the strength I had discovered, for the prospects ahead, and for this amazing new chapter. Life had tried me, but I had come out stronger, more ready to accept the freedom and joy that I had always earned. I was excited to explore where this fresh beginning would lead me to return to my former life. It was inevitable that my family would fail. Without me to discreetly cover the financial gaps, Anthony, Riley, and my mother had always lived over their means. They were swept up in their carelessness. After I departed, news came in through my uncle, who watched them closely but from a distance. Their opulent way of life quickly crumbled under the weight of their growing debt. Evicted from the property I sold, Anthony and Riley had taken up residence in a tiny, claustrophobic flat in the city. They had to work part-time jobs to cover their basic costs as their money rapidly dried up. In the meantime, my mother, who had always loved going on trips and going shopping, was having a hard time adjusting to a much more economical way of living. They started to get persistent calls from debt collectors at their door, endangering the life they had created. Entitlement and illusion were disintegrating. In an attempt to stay afloat, they took out loans from dubious lenders, but this only made matters worse. Their financial situation worsened with each poor choice, and their interpersonal ties became more strained. Now, the once proud family that had disregarded my efforts was barely surviving. Personally, I had no desire to go back to such poisonous setting. Every now and again, my uncle gave me an update. There was a hint of silent disapproval of their behavior in his voice. But I stayed out of the way. I had consciously decided to put my happiness first and start my own life. They had created their own problems, and I didn't want to be dragged back into their turmoil. I thought about the irony of it all a lot. The same individuals who had made fun of me for working quietly and keeping at home were now fighting for their lives. I had a bittersweet feeling of finality rather than schadenfreude. For years I had provided them my support, yet I was treated with treachery and apathy. I was now free to live a peaceful, purposeful life while they dealt with the fallout from their decisions. I had a deep feeling of satisfaction as I strolled down my new home's coastline. Although my path had been difficult, it had brought me to a position of strength and self-reliance. I didn't regret anything. My family's demise was their own fault, and I was at last content, concentrating on my joy and the better times to come. Story 3. One evening, my daughter came home crying uncontrollably. She had been invited earlier that week to a Christmas party at her grandparents' place, and she had just returned. She was obviously quite unhappy about something. She gave me a modest, well-wrapped present without a word. "Look at this, Mom." Her voice trembled as she spoke gently. "Why must I endure all of this?" My heart broke for her because I could see the anguish in her eyes. I carefully opened the gift, attempting to figure out what could have upset her so much. I was shocked to see that the present inside was completely unsuitable for a youngster. I decided to call the police right away, since I was so shocked and worried about the situation. This one act set off a series of circumstances that revealed the guilty party and had dire repercussions for them. The whole family was thus plunged into chaos. Although there was a lot of drama and damaged relationships as a result of the incident, justice was eventually done. 43 years old. I already had a distinct life to balance. My younger spouse was employed at the same firm as me. Actually, I had just begun a new job at the age of 32 when we first met. My former employer's harsh remark that I wasn't good enough because of my age caused my prior work to end poorly. Fortunately, abilities and commitment were more important at my present job than factors like gender or age. My spouse, who was my manager at the time, supported me and urged me to have confidence in myself. We fell in love right away and were married shortly after. Our lovely daughter is currently in the 4th grade. She is a lovely, compassionate person who enjoys reading and makes an effort to make friends with everyone. Things were never simple with my husband's sister, though, even if I got along well with the majority of my in-laws. She frequently made fun of how soon we were married and publicly expressed her disapproval of my being older than her brother. Particularly hurtful were her remarks on my age and the physical changes I experienced during pregnancy. I did my best to remain composed and not allow her words break me, even though they were painful. Being aware that it would improve my mental health, unexpectedly, once she got married quickly and relocated far away, her attitude started to shift. Now that she was gone, I could at last relish the calm delight of getting ready to welcome my baby into the world. Our daughter's birth wasn't simple. It was one of the most joyful times of our life, but it was also a difficult and draining event. My husband's unwavering encouragement and kind comments helped me get through every challenge. The moment our baby cried for the first time in the delivery room is something I will always remember. With tears in his eyes, my spouse held my hand while expressing his gratitude and pride in a whisper. It was an instant of unadulterated joy. But my sister-in-law also gave birth to a son 5 months after our daughter was born. She soon resumed coming to see us, despite the fact that it took her an hour to reach our house. It soon became evident that the objective of her trips was to draw parallels and offer criticism. She would frequently comment on how old I was, saying that our daughter's face showed signs of aging in the shape of fictitious wrinkles, which she contrasted to her son's flawless complexion. I tried to concentrate on my child and the pleasures of parenting, even if her remarks hurt. Her actions throughout these trips were the main source of my confusion. She never brought the infants anything. No toys, no diapers, nothing. Rather, claiming she didn't want to run out, she would depart with supplies from home, such as diapers and formula. Her visits seemed to be more about putting me down while taking advantage of our belongings than they were about us connecting. Fortunately, these visits ceased when her spouse relocated to a different state for a new career. Life became considerably more peaceful for a time. Our kid found new acquaintances as soon as she entered primary school. I was shocked to learn that she was attending the same school as her cousin, the same boy my sister-in-law frequently likened her to. Even when the family's grown-ups are at odds with one another, a genuine and intimate bond developed between the two kids. By the 3rd grade, my daughter, who is kind and caring, frequently watched out for her younger cousin. They attended the same school, and my daughter's instructors frequently complimented her on her diligence and friendliness. My kid received praise from the school for a reading assignment she finished that summer. Her review of the book was so excellent that the local newspaper picked it up for publication. She received a lot of acclaim for her feat, and it was brought up during a family visit to my in-laws' house. I could see how delighted everyone was as they came to congratulate her. But my sister-in-law didn't appear to be content. She actually had a very distressed appearance. She grumbled that it wasn't equitable. She went so far as to say that the book my daughter had read was intended for her son, implying that her kid wasn't getting the same care. In actuality, the children choose which book to use for their project after exchanging them over the summer. The secret to my daughter's success was not competition. It has to do with her passion for education and diligence. Nevertheless, my sister-in-law's remarks made it clear that she didn't like the focus being diverted from her and her family. I've learned to concentrate on the good things in spite of these difficulties. The greatest delight of my life has been witnessing my daughter develop into a resilient, intelligent, and kind little lady. My hubby has been my pillar of love and support through every challenge. Despite the complexity of family ties, they are fundamental. Our daughter never stops teaching us the importance of having an open heart, kindness, and strength. This instance brought to light the sharp contrast between the adults' arguments and the children's generosity. The book my daughter selected for her reading assignment was obviously preferred by my nephew, and my daughter was being kind. Give it to him first. Their capacity to share and encourage one another was shown by this little yet kind act. When I told the incident, my sister-in-law wrongly accused me of composing the award-winning reflection for my kid, despite the animosity between the grown-ups. She must have heard from my husband that I used to write books while I was in college, since she appeared to recall that. It wasn't as bad as that, though. She began disseminating false information to my daughter's school behind my back, alleging that I had given my daughter an unfair edge by using my personal contacts with the competition judges. My kid was profoundly affected by these baseless claims. The rumors and gossip demoralized her so much that she stopped enjoying her favorite pastime, reading. The tipping point for me was witnessing her distance herself from something she used to enjoy. In addition to my kid being the object of hurtful rumors, I was also unfairly singled out before I took any action. I sat down with my husband and told him about his sister's mistreatment of me from the beginning. I disclosed that she had stolen clothing intended for her daughter, claiming that newborns were indifferent to gender-specific attire, and that she had made derogatory remarks about my appearance when I was pregnant, likening me to a sumo wrestler. My spouse was enraged. He persisted on dealing with the matter head-on and acknowledged that it was time to contact his parents. We went together to confront his sister at her home. She first appeared thrilled, assuming the visit would be cordial, but her joy soon gave way to horror when my husband chastised her severely rather than accepting responsibility. She became enraged with me and accused me of betraying her by telling her favorite brother everything. In an attempt to transfer the responsibility, she portrayed herself as the victim. I first answered her calls in the hopes that she would wish to make apologies, but it soon became apparent that she was only expressing her annoyances. I finally made the decision to cease talking to her at all and to route her calls directly to voicemail. After 2 weeks or so, the calls ceased, and I thought she had finally moved on. Later on, though, I discovered that wasn't the case. My in-laws decided to have their first children's Christmas party in December. I was curious about the timing, but my daughter was thrilled to get the invitation. She was hoping for a similar Christmas celebration to the joyful one she had enjoyed in kindergarten. Unfortunately, because of their stringent attitude about religious activity, her primary school did not have holiday parties. I frequently question why such rigorous observance of religious customs is required, particularly in light of the fact that Christmas is now a widely recognized holiday, observed in many ways worldwide. After giving this some thought, I made the decision that my daughter and I would both celebrate the holidays in our own unique ways. We had quietly celebrated Christmas at home for the previous 2 years, and the gift exchange was our favorite activity. This year, a small $10 gift exchange budget was included with the invitation to my in-laws' celebration. In pursuit of the ideal present, my daughter and I embarked on an enjoyable shopping excursion to a sizable mall in the area. She looked at a number of possibilities before settling on one of her favorite picture books. On the day of the event, I am eager to share its narrative and happiness with someone at the party. With the present in hand, my daughter departed for my in-laws' house. She informed my mother-in-law of her plan because it was only a short bus trip from her house, and she graciously offered to meet her at the bus stop. I was able to rest for a bit when I got a call confirming that my daughter had arrived safely. However, such tranquility was short-lived. I hardly heard the front door open 44 minutes later. I was shocked by the sound. I was aware that my hubby was still at work on this weekday. I wasn't expecting anyone because I had been working from home throughout my daughter's winter vacation. I was devastated by what I witnessed. My kid was standing at the doorway. Tears stained her face. She simply handed me a gift bag that was carefully wrapped without saying anything. Her face told me that all will be explained in the contents. I grabbed the bag from her shaking hands, fearing what may be inside, and my heart fell. My daughter brought home a present, which I unwrapped. I withdrew a ripped newspaper with shaking hands. She tore her reading reflection to shreds. It was accompanied by a terrifying note that warned us not to get overconfident or risk looking like the stuffed animal with its head cut off. The card was written in crimson ink. The toy, which was damaged and covered with blood-like crimson ink, was also in the bag. Chills ran down my back. This wasn't a lighthearted joke. My kid was intentionally intimidated by the incident, conveyed the startling reality, still stunned. My sister-in-law gave me the unsettling present. I was taken aback. The grown-ups had all decided not to make the gifts themselves, and the goal of this Christmas celebration was to be a fun, kid-focused event. I never expected such a harsh gesture, even if I hadn't gone to the event with my kid. Making me even more incredulous, my mother-in-law had no idea her daughter would be at the party, I found out later. Every time her daughter made trouble, she insisted that we report it. However, it appeared like my sister-in-law had acted behind everyone's back this time. I was discouraged by this betrayal of confidence. I gently reminded my daughter that she needed to share the incident with her granny. My aunt, however, stopped her before she could say anything strange, stating that only kids associated with missionary schools were allowed to attend certain events. My daughter is perplexed. What is a missionary school, one could ask? I found it difficult to explain. A relative had recently been accepted into one, which caused the family to talk a lot. It appeared that my sister-in-law took advantage of the fact that her son was enrolled in a missionary kindergarten to disparage our choice to send our daughter to a public school in the area. I was so upset by the menacing gift that I made the decision to stop. I was determined to report the incident, so I hurried to the police. The officers initially gave the impression that this was a family issue and appeared hesitant. Although it was best handled in private, a sympathetic female officer recognized how serious the situation was. She promised to give my sister-in-law a warning and clarified that harassment and threats within families were still illegal. I told my husband all about it when he got home that night, furious. He called his parents right away to let them know what had happened. They were taken aback, particularly considering that they denied knowing my sister-in-law was attending the party. They hypothesized that, while my mother-in-law was preoccupied with other obligations, she might have entered through an unlocked back door. Following the police officer's warning, my in-laws called a family meeting the following day to discuss the matter. My sister-in-law and her husband were late to the party. Her husband appeared to have no idea why the meeting had been called, and she entered the room with a disgruntled expression, obviously upset about the police involvement, as it became clear how much she had done. Her spouse was clearly taken aback. He expressed sincere regret for his wife's actions and offered us several expressions of apology, a far cry from her own disobedience. She obstinately maintained that she must be innocent because the police had not taken her into custody. The entire room was stunned by her lack of responsibility. Then something unexpected happened. Her spouse declared his intention to seek for divorce. We were all taken aback by the announcement because their marriage had shown no obvious symptoms of discord. He added that he had put up with years of her conduct, which included everything from her recklessness in putting his family in difficult situations to her disregard of home chores. Her preoccupation with looks had resulted in a number of needless actions that were all excused by her conceit rather than her true needs. Her desire to get their kid into a prominent school was frequently the reason for these moves, but they invariably ended in shame and despair. Their son ultimately decided to go to a public primary school. His father endorsed this choice. Her current persecution of our family, in spite of her early protests, was the last straw for him, and hastened his decision to quit the marriage, which was unexpected given her husband's declaration. My sister-in-law made an effort to change her mind. She made a feeble apology, saying that what she had done was only a harmless prank. However, no one was persuaded that the vile message, the maimed toy, and the threatening note went much beyond what could possibly be justified as a practical joke. Her actions were concerning and unacceptable, especially considering that a youngster was the objective. I spoke with her openly, pointing out the clear discrepancy between her behavior and a loving parent's instincts. You don't naturally have parental instincts just because you're a parent. I informed her that your behavior reveals your level of concern. Her quiet was quite telling. No one was prepared to stand up for her anymore, and the family's trust had been irrevocably damaged. As the conference drew to an end, it was evident that this chapter had been a turning point for everyone, not just for her. The rest of us concentrated on safeguarding our kids and going on, while she stayed obstinate, resolved to keep our lives from being overshadowed by her resentment. This experience taught me that advocating for my kid was not only essential, but also empowering. No matter how difficult the circumstance, I would always decide to keep her safe and demonstrate to her that bravery, compassion, and resiliency will always triumph against cruelty. I made eye contact with my sister-in-law and pointed out that her actions were completely out of character for someone in her position. She had gone too far, and it was not something that could be easily ignored. My husband addressed her aggressively, obviously upset. "Nothing can be resolved by crying," he remarked. "You are mature enough to accept accountability for your deeds. Don't think that crying will make you likable or forgive you." She said she had done nothing wrong and questioned why she was being held responsible, yet she kept crying. Her emotions quickly escalated into accusations, saying that my marriage to her brother was the reason for the family's dislike. She suggested that rather than her own behavior, the true problem was me, the elder wife. We were astounded by her total inability to comprehend the seriousness of her actions. Her failure to take responsibility seemed to greatly affect my spouse in particular. One could feel the tension in the room. There appeared to be no way to resolve the issue, and the conversation abruptly ended. She was discreetly taken home by her husband, who was clearly humiliated. The divorce process proceeded in spite of her disobedience, but with a lot of opposition from her. She made the process more difficult than necessary by refusing to accept responsibility for her mistakes. Her son's disclosure was what finally turned the tide. He described in detail the plush animal that had been ripped apart and splattered with crimson ink to resemble blood, as he informed his peers about the Christmas party and the eerie gift exchange in his naive honesty. His tale swiftly gained traction among the school community, raising concerns among parents and teachers. My daughter was greatly impacted by the flurry of rumor that followed this unintentional disclosure. She had a hard time going back to school. Rumors connected her to the event depressed her spirits. Speculation centered on the relationship between her disappearance and the Christmas party activities, emphasizing how one careless deed might have far-reaching consequences. I had hoped that the issue might be settled amicably, so that my daughter could recover and go back to school when she was ready. Her cousin didn't want to hurt anyone by telling the story. It was a frantic request that someone put an end to his mother's destructive actions. These disclosures had a profound impact on her spouse, who made the decision to hasten the divorce. In order to complete their separation, he accepted her requirements. For the benefit of their son, they wished to move on. By that time, she was notorious in the neighborhood for her dangerous conduct with youngsters. Previously friendly neighbors turned hostile toward her and shunned her. She regarded the divorce as a way out of her sense of rejection and captivity. She thought she might find solace in her parents' house. However, she was refused admittance even there. Her ex-husband, on the other hand, was adamant about keeping custody of their kid. She didn't argue with the decision. She said icily that she didn't care about her son, claiming that having kids was a hassle and that it got in the way of her intentions to get married again. Her son responded courageously to her harsh remarks. He adamantly said that his father's attention was comforting and that he didn't need her in his life. He even told her not to get near my daughter, his cousin, ever again. After she was denied entry to her parents' house, her circumstances deteriorated. She continued to deteriorate, finding it difficult to pay for necessities and accruing debt from dubious sources. She eventually vanished completely. Her absence was viewed by my husband and his parents as a resolution rather than a reason for alarm, so they decided not to report her missing. Following these incidents, my daughter gradually regained her self-confidence and went back to school. Her cousin promised to watch out for her and continued to be a supporting figure. Our family's relationship was surprisingly enhanced during this trying time. We collaborated to help the kids, and my ex-brother-in-law became a close ally. My in-laws took full responsibility and embraced both of their grandchildren. They helped to establish a secure and stable atmosphere for the children by showing them love and care while my sister-in-law was away, removing her from the equation. At last, our family was at peace. Conflict had previously overshadowed the trust and understanding that now developed, enabling us to proceed as a stronger, more cohesive family.